very much. And so you're going to get to experience the true Southern accent of the United States. So I hear that I have a strong accent. I can't hear it myself, but apparently I do. So just preface that. So yes, and I'm coming to you more as a personal perspective than a professional perspective, but I wanted to blend the two because I feel like my personal experience, facilitated my professional life and career, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even realize it until my late 20s, early 30s. I'm 37 now, and I ended up in a situation where I never saw myself, but it is a true connection, and it sometimes life's journey takes you there and you have no idea it will take you there, and I feel like it's a purpose. And I wanted to do this because I titled it Making Mother Known, because my mother was a wonderful mother. She had schizophrenia. She was diagnosed at 32, and which is a late onset normally, and I was 2 years old. But she exhibited such passion to be a mother. We were poor, we were on disability, so it's not like we lived very moderately in an apartment. But I want to shine the light on who she was as a person. And I feel that people with mental illness, especially mothers, they lose that identity. They lose the identity of who they are, and they become the illness. And that's all people see. And so my goal is, research-wise, this topic, but also to make the mother, who she is. Who was she? Who does she want to be in the future? And so these are some of my objectives. I probably won't get into too much depth, but I wanted to just touch on some things in these 20 minutes. But this is my mother, and so I wanted to put a face with her, Patricia, that she was robust, that she was a person with interests and ideas, and the mental illness was something she had, but it should not have ever defined her. But unfortunately, it defined her. It defined her life, it defined what she had access to, and it took away so much that it didn't need to. So I lost her in 2012. She was young, 66. But as with so many people with mental illness, as they get later on in life, she had a lot of physical illness and physical, disabilities, so to speak, that kind of took her life at that end. So I wanted to kind of say a life before that is usually lost and forgotten. And I want to kind of hopefully change that for mothers, and mothers for me, because that's just my personal perspective. And fathers are just as important, but just for me and where I come from, I identify with the mother. Because I lived with just my mother. My parents divorced, as you'll find out in kind of her journey, and I hope to want to highlight other women's journeys with serious mental illness who are parents. And this is who she is. And before 1978, which was when she turned 32, this is who she was. One of 7 daughters, very lower middle class working family, but my grandmother was a solid, educated, but not educated, only had an 8th grade education, but she was very knowledgeable, a wealth of information. She was the core foundation spiritually, and she really kept her children solid in those foundations. My mother, the one of 7, she was the 4th child. She was and they all kind of identified her as this way, all her sisters. She was the ambitious one, the diligent one, the studious one, the quiet one. But she had such insecurity and self-esteem, very little self-esteem. She was a scholar, a cheerleader, an athlete in high school. She did everything, she was always ambitious, always trying to excel. She was the only one to work her way through college. So she worked and she put her way through college with sociology and anthropology. And she got married, found, early 20s, 23, 24. And she worked. She had a life. She had opportunity, employment in different areas. Disability Determination Office, which I find her area of interest is interesting before she got diagnosed. And my area of interest, I kind of followed in her footsteps in a weird way that I never saw before because, and I'll get to that in a little bit, I don't want too much time. She traveled, she socialized, and then she got pregnant with me, And then this is the year that I mark as a transition of who she was as a robust individual to what the mental illness took, and it became all that she was, which is unfair. And these are the things she experienced that were triggers. She had very low coping skills when it came to stress. I find myself a little bit opposite in that sense, and maybe that was a resiliency factor for me that helped. But for her, those stressful triggers, which was a lot of stress, these are the things that happened to her. She wasn't working at the time, so all of those things were crashing down. And that's when they called it, nervous breakdown in '78. And misdiagnosed, given electric shock treatments, things that were not appropriate for her, or her true diagnosis, which was not defined at the time. And very little medication to none, we know, at that time. So the next 20 years, she gets SSDI and she lives minimally. She raises daughter alone. She has support from her mother, which I think was crucial. We talk about social supports. And I always try to wrap my mind around what was different between my mom and me and other moms and children. And how did I get where I am, and how did she help me versus other mothers and children who struggle? What's the difference? What are those pieces that I want to identify and help other mothers and children in those situations? But one was a very supportive best friend of her mother, strong, solid. I could call my grandmother when my mother was having paranoid episodes, which were often. It was like this growing up because she wasn't on medication. She was in involuntary commitment many, many times in my life. And it was extremely chaotic. But at the same time, it was an extremely loving environment. My mom got up every morning, she made my breakfast, she took me to school, she got me involved I got to take taekwondo and ballet and tap with very minimal resources she had. And it's fascinating that she could do those things but still be so sick. And I found that fascinating in and of itself, because so many people disregard that as women not being able to do that if you have a mental illness. And that's not possible, but it is possible. And she's a living proof of that. So if she is, I know other mothers are too. And what is it that we can do to help even more? And as her life went on, constantly involuntary commitment, hospitalization, some lasted a year. I had to live with my father in 6th grade. But her schizophrenia defined her after 1978. Not all of those other things. And so as she basically became the disease, and that's how people viewed her, these were her barriers. She didn't, her other sisters didn't contact her, didn't call her, didn't take her out to dinner, didn't do anything with her. She had no friends. She never, in my entire life, went out with a friend to dinner, went to a movie with a friend, did anything for herself. Her whole life revolved around making sure I got what I needed. And, I do get emotional, even now, talking about it, because she's probably one of the best people, but she is the best person I will ever know on this earth. And so I like to honor that. And her ex-husband, new wife, didn't, get it. Nobody got it. We were isolated. Nobody, how are you doing? What can we do to help? It's not like that. But with everything else, any other illness, you get the prayer groups, you get the cookies and brownies coming up, and people checking on you. People don't do that with mental illness. They disappear. So she was isolated. She had no employment opportunities, but highly educated. There was nothing to help her get back into the employment world, but she's so easily good at it. If we had had those services and supports. Ineffective medication. The medications today didn't even, that are effective went until the 1990s before certain medications really started, the atypicals that we now have and some of the newer medications. But by that time, she had gone so long, she had deteriorated so much that even being on those medications, it could only do so much for her. Didn't have these things. Didn't have peer support. Didn't have assertive community treatment teams who came out to you where you live and assess how you are and go to you as your needs are met. Great. I don't know if other countries have this similar terminology, but great, highly rated evidence-based practice, but very, very expensive. In-home case management. None of those things existed. And so for me, my reaction, and as I go through and listen to all of these workshops, I can identify, and I'm like, yeah, because I remember, I was kind of like a little mini adult, worried about them constantly. I was more serious. I focused and delved into studies, and I don't know, I look back and think of maybe that was my way of controlling an environment that was chaotic and uncontrollable. But fortunately that was a good thing because it helped me in life. I could have focused on something that would have been really detrimental. So I was a loner. Played by myself for hours. I pretended to have a normal life. No one knew that my mother had a mental. I never spoke about it. Never spoke about it to anybody in high school. Never spoke about it to anybody I dated. Nobody came to our apartment. I made up stuff. I pretended that she did not have a mental illness. I was involved in high school. I did all the activities. And I delved into academics and extracurricular, and anything you can think of, I did. And because of that, I wanted to be normal. I wanted to be the normal person, just like everybody else I was going to school with. I didn't want anybody to know. A lot of it because of embarrassment, shame. A lot of it because I did not want my mother to be labeled, and I knew they'd call her crazy. You got the crazy mom. And that's the last thing that I wanted. So, and also didn't understand about schizophrenia. Nobody talked to me. Nobody explained to me about the disease and the symptoms and what she's going through and what she may go through in the future. And that trying to rationalize her taking her medication is kind of beating her head against a wall because she lacked the insight to even know or realize she had a mental illness. But unless you get that education, you're not going to understand that, and you're going to think they're just being obstinate or just not wanting to help themselves. So, as a teenager, I just isolated myself from her. I did my own thing. She did her own thing. I was in my own little world. I'd come home. She'd make me dinner, but we did not communicate. But she was so sick. She would stay in her room all the time, lay in her bed all the time. And I didn't understand it. I got to the point where I was just focusing on me and my life because I couldn't do anything about it. And as I went to college, I did the same thing. I was, didn't speak to them. Oh, I'm having a hard time. Okay. Didn't speak about it to my friends either. So it wasn't until my mid-20s that I started getting involved, and I applied to be the director at NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness in our country, for those of you who are not in the United States. And it was almost like the most therapeutic thing I could have ever done, because it was the first time in my life I had shared my story, and I kept sharing. And it was so cathartic. It was such a release to identify with other people that got it, that understood. And so, as I moved on, I ended up with the Department of Mental Health, met great people, got connected to Dr. Martin, who was involved with professional committees, and it just happened that I'm going down the path of research in this area that I had no idea. I was thinking, oh, I'm going to do computer science or something I'm going to make a lot of money on. Totally not in counseling, at all. And I ended up exactly for a great reason. But what I needed, what she needed, these are things that weren't met. And, I think we hear all of these things over and over again. A child needs security, stability, order, and predictability. They don't have that. And when they don't have that, we've got to find a way to figure out how best to make that happen as much as you can. Because with that comes emotional stability and children in counseling, because it does affect you as you get older. You don't even understand. You don't even realize that it affected me with depression, anxiety, and other things, and I didn't even know it. And a lot of times that happens. So what she needed, what I needed, later in life, I'm over on my minutes, but we do 2 more minutes and I'll be done. The good things. She was placed on Clausville. Had a great impact on her mental health. Was in group homes. I moved her to Montgomery assisted living. We had a great, we got to do a lot of great things, even though physically she couldn't do it. So we were always close. We were always connected. And she was a wonderful person. She was always my support. She was always my, behind me, my cheerleader. And then the good things happened because of those qualities in her. So what I say is the mask, this is what it does. It's her false identity. It devalues, denies, diminishes, and detracts from who she really is as a person. And we are all complex. We have such great things, all of us do. And assumptions we have to reject. That they are an all or nothing ability to be a good mother. They either are or not. It's just not true. That children can't succeed or positively adapt. That they can't develop a healthy, positive, and loving bond. And we have to reject this, that services are adequate, and that mothers can't provide adequate care, love, and nurture their children. That mental health professionals are knowledgeable, because they're not. I work for the Department of Mental Health, and I ask, do we capture data on people who are parents, and we don't even capture the data. We have no idea who we serve in our state that are parents. It's not important. They don't. It is mind-boggling, the lack of information. And there's, oh, well, I didn't really think, I didn't really realize. I'm like, it's unbelievable. But that's where we are in our state and many others. So next steps, I hope, education, education, education. Especially those who are coming to be counselors, social workers, whoever they are, start early, put them in the university level. And some other things we've talked about before. Nothing new to any of you. And I've run out of my time, so thank you. It was very...
So you have time for questions.
Okay.
You could have caught up there.
Oh, it's hard to not ramble sometimes.
So are there some strange sound effects coming out of the room, but questions?
Shannon, can you help us to understand from your personal experience and from your work experience how we can help other professionals to know that even when the relationship and the bond between a mother and child is not sort of stereotypical, healthy, or that it's still a bond and that it's still an important bond, and how can we sort of get that message out and help people to understand that you know, even though it's not a secure attachment, that it's still an attachment.
Right, because I always say that even in my mother's sickest moments, she had such clarity at times and such rational thoughts and behaviors at the same time that she was just as sick. And so I think we categorize people in a psychotic episode, or that's all they are, and they don't have the ability to kind of cross over, but my mother did. And professionals I've come across, either they don't understand it, they don't recognize it, or they don't believe it can happen. And I don't know, I'm interested in the stigma part of it, because I don't know whether the professionals, even people I work with personally, get it that this is a need and it's something that needs to be addressed. I feel that it's something they're not even thinking of. And so I really feel that we've got to start with our university settings to incorporate these type of classes and education on these issues, so once they get in the field, they really understand and they don't come with a preconception and have that stigma. Because it's interesting to note all of the stigma that exists within the mental health profession, which is surprising but very much there. And so I wonder, is that part of it? Is that part of why they don't focus on it? They just assume, make all these assumptions of what parents and children experience. And I don't know. I mean, but there's so much research that needs to be done. That's what's so great about this conference. It's exciting and lighting my fire. So so I'm very excited. But that's a hard question to know. I think we really need to focus on the mental health professionals and figure out what are they thinking and why aren't these services available? We're putting efforts into other services, so what's the difference? Why is that not a priority versus this a priority? And why do you assume this isn't a priority? What is it? What are the rationality behind it? And that's I would like to get to know that, to know really, because you got to address that to figure out whether or not even wanting to implement these kind of programs. I don't know. Anyway, I can get on a soapbox really easily. So I'm in one of those what do you call them? Not bureaucrats, but advocrats.
Oh, and advocrats, yes.
Yeah, I'm a thorn in their side. And I'm always like pushing.
There is time for one short question. If somebody, I don't know if we'll get a short answer, but.
Yes, you will. I promise.
Does anybody have something they wanted to ask, Shannon?
No, they don't want to hear me.
Well, I think it was a beautiful presentation. How you put that together, and it's a real tribute to your mother.
Yeah, and I want her to be remembered for a lot more than the illness, I guess.
Yes.
You know, she was much more than that.
You did an excellent job there.
Yeah, thank you.